Hello, welcome to Guilty Like a Mother. If you are new here, we cover crime cases from all over. Today we are talking about John DeBlase and Heather Keaton. Those are cases from Alabama. This is our 7th episode. So if you haven't subscribed, followed, go ahead and do that. Share, show us some support. We'll really appreciate it. We're talking about John DeBlase and Heather Keaton. These are 2 death penalty cases. So if you don't like death penalty cases, you might want to catch us on a different one. John DeBlase was living in the Mobile area. That's where he grew up. And in 2005, he and a woman named Corinne had a little girl named Natalie. Now, John thought that Natalie was just a little princess, the same every dad does, right?
Mm-hmm.
John and Corinne got married the next year in 2006. And later that year, they had a little boy named Chase. So they had 2 kids, like, right after the other. John and Corinne had some marital issues. They were off again, on again. John was into entertainment wrestling and let a man move in with him and Corinne. That man and Corinne had an affair. So John and Corinne split up and they finally divorced. So whenever John and Corinne split up, John moved in with his mother and father, Anne and Richard DeBlase. When they moved in with Anne and Richard DeBlase, of course, that was a lot of support for John. And everybody saw John as, a great father. At that point in time, before the divorce, Corinne had the kids. But when they got divorced, John actually won custody of the kids because he was just in a better position, probably because he was living in his parents' house and had their support.
Mm-hmm.
John met this woman named Heather Keaton. Heather was a college student there in Mobile, and Heather also suffered from some blindness. I don't think that she was completely blind, but she had some sort of blindness.
Yeah.
And so Heather and John started dating in October 2008. Heather got sick in 2009, so she left school, moved back to Kentucky where her family lived, and then when she got well, she came back to Alabama, and she eventually moved in the home with John and his parents. But Heather butted heads with John's mom, like, so much over how to raise the kids. And, like, honestly, who are you, the girlfriend of the dad, to be like, oh, I think the kids should be raised like this? Like, what? But she did. And they, Anne and Heather butted heads so much that Anne and Richard were finally like, listen, John, Heather has to get out. Heather wasn't the only one that moved out. John took his kids and moved out with her. And they were homeless, which, like, what kind of sense does that make? I think he just was, I don't know, so blinded by his love for Heather that he made some terrible decisions, for sure.
Yes.
So, yeah. Like, why would you, I don't know, move
Yeah.
out? They moved out the day before Christmas Eve, so December 23rd, 2009. They went and stayed at the home of another friend for like a month, and then they went to stay with the Rios family. The Rios family was a family that John had met through this entertainment wrestling. And I think that the Rios family had kids as well. So Heather talked to the mom of the Rios family and told her things like she didn't want to raise kids, and also made statements like these kids were demon spawned from hell. Like, so, and so because of how Heather was, like, raising the kids, the Rios the Rios family asked John and Heather to move out. And not only did they ask John and Heather to move out, but they called John's parents and were like, hey, we're pretty concerned about how the kids are being treated. Like, we think that you need to look into this.
Yeah.
It was like a month later, at some point in February, that one of the Rios kids had a birthday party. So the kids went to this birthday party. And Chase had some digestive issues. He was having really bad diarrhea and he smelled terrible. So the mom, Heather Rios, gave him a bath. And also Chase and his sister acted like they were starving. They ate so much food. And it wasn't a problem for the Rioses. They just noticed that's not the way these kids were behaving the last time we saw them.
Mm-hmm.
So they noticed that. Yeah. Things have changed here. Something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So then John and Heather moved in to a trailer that was owned by a man named Roger Champion. Roger owned this trailer, this mobile home, but he had agreed to rent it to John because he was moving out. So I guess Roger was in the process of moving out and actually stayed in the trailer for a day or so with John and Heather and the kids. So he witnessed things like he saw John and Heather go out and get burgers for themselves while these little kids shared a little bitty small salad. Then the next morning for breakfast, the kids shared one of those little snack size boxes of cereal. They shared it. And then I guess that Heather had a piece of pie sitting up on the counter. Well, Natalie got that piece of pie and Heather was pissed about this piece of pie. She grabbed Natalie by the hair and she started beating her with a belt. And Chase got knocked to the floor. And so, yeah. So Roger Champion, again, he knew John's parents and he called John's parents and were like, I'm concerned. This is not the way that you treat kids. These kids are being abused. John's parents had not seen the kids, I guess, since they left the day before Christmas Eve because they didn't have the opportunity to give them their Christmas presents. So they went over to this trailer to give the kids their Christmas presents. And John let them in, let them have the presents, open their presents. Heather comes in and she is screaming, what's that bee doing here? So the parents leave. They actually went outside. They had brought a cousin or something with them. They went outside and let the cousin sit and visit for a minute. And then they all just left. So Heather and John left that mobile home and they moved into an apartment. They moved into this apartment. In this apartment, there was a lot. It was in a high traffic area. These kids would be outside playing in this high traffic area. They had no supervision. They would see Chase and he would have a sagging, dirty diaper on that wasn't being changed. And at one point in time, as part of the lease, which I think is common for a lot of apartments, you sign the lease that they have the right to come into your apartment and check for things or change air filters or whatever, So this woman knocked at the door several times. Nobody opened the door to the apartment. So she used the master key to open the door. And when she opened the door, she found Chase and Natalie sitting against the wall on separate walls. They were facing the wall and they were just shaking. And Heather walked in and this woman was standing there in the living room and Heather just lost her mind. She started screaming at the kids. because she said that the kids let the woman in. The woman tried to explain she let herself in with the master key. And John and Heather didn't just complain at that point in time about the woman coming in. They continued to run into the woman and complain to the point that the woman was like, do you have something to hide? Like, what is your problem here?
Yeah, right.
So the Rios family, the family that they had lived with, the one that had the birthday party, they ran into John in Walmart in early March of 2010. And they were like, hey, where are the kids? We'd like to say hi. John said that Natalie was staying with a friend, but Chase was in the car with Heather. So they went out to the car and they saw Chase, and he looked what the Rioses described as emergency room sick. They said he was pale, he was in a stupor, and they begged Heather to take him to the emergency room. Heather didn't. She did call a doctor that had seen the kids before, and the doctor, only has what you say to go off of.
Right.
So the doctor just said, like, give him Gatorade and keep an eye on him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that wasn't going to help the situation, but
Right.
John
started it, probably.
Right. So John and Heather, like early on in early 2010, John had enrolled in college at Blue Cliff College. And John was getting a ride from another person that was going to college, but suddenly Heather started coming with him. Like on June 21st, 2010, Heather went to college with John, and one of the classmates was like, where are your kids? And they were like, oh, they're with a friend. Heather spoke to this person and was like calling the kids the spawn of Satan. But Heather was pregnant with John's child, and she referred to the child she was pregnant with as the chosen one. So they continue to tell like different stories and say that the kids were living in Las Vegas with like a relative or a friend. At some point in time, John and Heather move in with Heather's mom, Helena. And Helena hears a conversation where I don't know if John's like wanting to break up with Heather or what it is, but Heather says that she'll tell, and the mom's like, what's going on? Heather told her mom, the kids are no longer with us. Like, whatever that, like what, I don't know. That could mean so many things. It could mean that they're deceased, but it could also mean that they're staying somewhere else, which is what they continued to say anyway. The police did talk to John. They talked to Heather. Heather, when she was spoke to by police, she continually portrayed herself as the victim of abuse, as, being disabled because of her blindness. Poor, pitiful me. Finally, they found out that Heather said Natalie threw up black stuff and had like toxic breath on March 4th. So while John was at college, she put Natalie on a tarp and put her in a closet. And I think Natalie was like still alive at that point in time, but she died during that day. So when John came home from school, they loaded Natalie, who was wearing red pajamas, into the back of their van, and they took her out to the woods. John took his daughter, who he referred to as his little princess, out and disposed of her in the woods. Then on June 20th, which I believe was Father's Day, Chase had the same symptoms. He had the toxic breath and he was throwing up black stuff. He was also disposed of in the woods. The police did go and try to find Chase. They weren't able to find Chase as a whole. They found some bones, but just a small fraction of the bones that are in the human body. And some things that they found were like duct tape, like a full head of duct tape. And there was even a sock stuck to the duct tape, which would have been like where the mouth was. They also found training pants. John, I believe it was John, made it seem like the children were being poisoned, that Heather was poisoning the children little by little, and putting poison in their sippy cups. Police or, medical professionals did test for like antifreeze, and they weren't able to find antifreeze in what little remains they could find of either one of the children. But that doesn't mean that they weren't given antifreeze. There could be a lot of reasons why the antifreeze wasn't present in their system.
Yeah.
So John and Heather were both found guilty of capital murder, and they were both sentenced to the death penalty. They're both on death row in Alabama. And Heather is one of only like 4 or 5 women on death row in Alabama. Good for her on that one.
Yeah.
She just
Right.
seems like such an evil person because and John says, I was blinded by love. That's on you. Those were your kids,
Mm-hmm.
they were in this world because of you, and you let this woman abuse them terribly, and then you threw them in the woods when they died.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, and people did say like she definitely was the disciplinarian. He just sat there and let it happen. Spineless.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do we even know if they were even expelled or, taking out black stuff or anything like that? Like, we don't know anything they said was true. And whatever happened to the chosen one, the baby that she was pregnant with?
I think she had that baby probably in jail. She did have that baby. Actually, I read that somewhere. I think I wrote it down.
I wonder if the state has the baby or maybe his mom.
I don't. Her mom or his parents could have the child. I don't know. The child would have been born, I think, at the end of 2010. John
Yeah.
DeBlase was arrested in December of 2010, and Heather was actually arrested on child abuse prior to being charged with capital murder because I think they were just trying to get information out of her, and everybody was like, she was abusing the kids, and she was.
That is heartbreaking. Those poor kids, what they had to go through.
And everything said like that the kids, things were perfectly normal with them up until the point that Heather got involved. They were having regular checkups at the doctor. They were being treated just fine. And then Heather gets involved and they both die months
She's
apart.
just not capable of loving anyone. I mean, and
She didn't want those kids. I mean, I guess because they weren't her kids.
I just don't think that she would take care of the chosen one any better.
Maybe not.
Capable of taking care of a kid right. She had some serious mental issues.
I really hate whenever they talk about cases where they put little kids in closets and stuff like.
Yeah, I know it.
Okay, here it is. Upon searching their impounded van, law enforcement recovered pictures of Natalie and Chase, children's stuffed animals, a duffel bag, and a container of antifreeze. So that might have given them more of a reason to check for the antifreeze, but they just didn't find it.
It seems like they were taken good care of before because that's who he was with. Make sure that happened. So he just went with the flow. Whatever, his women wanted. I don't know.
I mean, everyone said that he was a good dad. before that point in time. Even the mom, Corinne, who hadn't seen the children for, I think she saw them last November of 2009. She couldn't, imagine John being cruel to the children either.
I don't know that he was, but if he's allowing for the other, Heather to do whatever she wants, that makes him what is that? An accessory?
Accessory.
Yeah, especially if he's going and he's helping her get rid of their bodies.
Yeah.
His own kids.
Here's a quote. It says, when after finding Natalie dead, he said he loved Keaton and was afraid of losing her, their expected child, and Chase. DeBlase also admitted that he saw Keaton duct tape Chase to a broom handle on the evening of June 19th, which would have been the day before he died. Keaton was disciplining Chase due to lack of success in his potty training. He was taped rigid to a broom handle and was unable to move his arms or legs, then placed in a corner of the bedroom and wedged against the wall by a dresser. A tarp was put under his feet. DeBlase took a sleeping pill to help him sleep in the same room where Chase stood. The next morning, Father's Day, DeBlase woke to find Chase still taped to the broom with a sock in his mouth and tape around his face. Chase was dead. Chase's body was put in a garbage bag. Later, he was transported in the back of a van to Mississippi and left in the woods.
That is heartbreaking. That poor baby.
Taped to, it's just like she found new ways to discipline them.
It sounds like he suffocated.